The Pacific Rim franchise is a series of science fiction movies that showcase colossal robots known as Jaegers, engaging in battle against enormous creatures called Kaiju, which emerge from a portal situated in the Pacific Ocean. The initial film, helmed by Guillermo del Toro, hit theaters in 2013 and garnered immense popularity among fans of the genre. However, the second installment, Pacific Rim Uprising, directed by Stephen S. DeKnight and released in 2018, disappointed many enthusiasts. The question now arises as to whether a third Pacific Rim film will be produced and what it might entail. Let's explore and uncover what lies ahead. According to some sources, there were plans for a third movie that would have set up a massive crossover between Pacific Rim and the MonsterVerse, which includes Godzilla and King Kong. This would have been awesome to see on the big screen, as we would have witnessed some epic battles between Jaegers, Kaiju, Godzilla, and King Kong. It's interesting to consider how Pacific Rim and the MonsterVerse could work together. Timeline-wise, Godzilla can't exist in the Pacific Rim due to the first recorded Kaiju attack being in 2013. So the universes would likely be separate, but cross over in some way.
To Sydney base!
Communications are down. They cannot hear us.
A fun idea is Godzilla falling into a portal leading to the Pacific Rim version of the Earth, creating a new categorization of Kaiju. It would be amusing if a Jaeger ended up in the MonsterVerse, where not every Kaiju is hostile. Either way, a crossover or connection will have to live on in the imagination. At the very least, both MonsterVerse and Pacific Rim are getting new content. Pacific Rim The Black can hopefully lead to more Pacific Rim projects. Meanwhile, although Godzilla vs. Kong is the last confirmed MonsterVerse film, the universe will receive an animated show set on Skull Island. So what are the chances of a Pacific Rim 3 happening in the future? Well, it depends on several factors. One is the popularity and success of the Netflix series. If the series attracts a lot of viewers and generates buzz for the franchise, it might convince the studios to give it another shot at a live-action movie. Another factor is the availability and interest of the original cast and crew. Guillermo del Toro has stated that he has no plans to return to direct or produce a third movie, but he might change his mind if he sees a good opportunity or a good story. John Boyega, who starred as Jake Pentecost in Uprising, has also expressed his interest in reprising his role, but he might be busy with other projects. The demands and competition from other sci-fi movies Pacific Rim has to compete with other big-budget franchises like Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Jurassic World, and more. It has to offer something unique and appealing to stand out from the crowd and attract audiences. It also has to appeal to both domestic and international markets, especially China, which is a huge market for sci-fi movies. How the Black expands the Pacific Rim universe on Netflix. Netflix's Pacific Rim The Black continues the monster franchise with an animated sequel. But how does the show fit into the Pacific Rim timeline? The original Pacific Rim movie, directed by Guillermo del Toro, kicked off the war between Kaiju and humanity's Jaegers with a story primarily set in 2025. Next, Pacific Rim Uprising jumped forward a decade to explore more of this world. The box office returns on the sequel weren't as large as the studios hoped for, though, and at least temporarily put an end to the franchise's big screen presence. 3 years after Pacific Rim Uprising's release, the franchise was able to continue thanks to Netflix, as the streaming service is the home of an animated series that further explores Pacific Rim's world. Pacific Rim The Black primarily follows the adventures of siblings Taylor and Haley Travis as they travel across the kaiju-infested remains of Australia in search of their parents. Season 1 expanded the mythology of the Pacific Rim franchise in some fascinating ways with minimal movie connections, and Pacific Rim The Black Season 2's Kaiju Messiah storyline took even further horrifying liberties. So where does the Pacific Rim The Black fits in the timeline? Pacific Rim The Black works well on its own without needing to pinpoint the precise time it takes place in the Pacific Rim timeline, and the show actually refrains from signaling exactly where it falls. However, there are several context clues that provide an idea of where the movie falls on the timeline. Before getting too into the weeds of the references to the other movies, the best clue for when the animated series takes place is how it builds on the live-action sequel. There are references to the events of the film, which squarely makes Pacific Rim The Black take place after Pacific Rim Uprising's ending. It isn't clear exactly how much time has passed between these stories, though. There are many clues that point to the Pacific Rim the Black coming after Pacific Rim Uprising in the Pacific Rim timeline. For starters, it is established in the movie canon that there were no kaiju attacks between Pacific Rim and its sequel, so this immediately rules out the chance of it fitting in somehow. The appearance of Herc Hansen through a flashback to Operation Blackout pushes back how early in the timeline it can take place too. The show also repeatedly mentions the Uprising Wars, which is what the events of the sequel are known as in-universe. The Travis siblings even discover several destroyed Jaegers who fought in that war. All of this further supports Pacific Rim the Black taking place after Pacific Rim Uprising and representing the farthest point in the Pacific Rim timeline that the franchise has gone. Despite these references, nailing down an exact year for Pacific Rim the Black's events is more difficult. Taylor and Haley go to find their parents 5 years after they were last seen, right before Operation Blackout commenced. The show doesn't clarify if Operation Blackout is tied to the Uprising Wars at all, or if that event happens well after the attack featured in Pacific Rim Uprising. With the movie's events falling in 2035, the earliest Pacific Rim the Black can take place is 2040. However, it is equally possible that Operation Blackout occurred decades later. Since there won't be any more seasons after Pacific Rim the Black Season 2's ending, the exact setting of the show could remain a lingering question. Since Season 2 was the last, the show may be as far as the Pacific Rim timeline ever gets. While Pacific Rim 3 was planned at one point and could have potentially linked the original franchise to the animated series, that movie isn't going forward. The only hope for Pacific Rim continuing at this point would be its rumored crossover event with the Godzilla-Kong monsterverse, but that's also looking doubtful since Pacific Rim 3 was supposed to set it up. What Pacific Rim the Black's conclusion ultimately means, then, is that the Pacific Rim timeline and the franchise might be over. With Kaiju Messiahs arriving on the scene, perhaps the series has reached peak robot ridiculousness and it's the right time to power down. The future of the Pacific Rim franchise remains uncertain. While there were plans for a Pacific Rim 3 that would have set up a crossover with the Godzilla-Kong monsterverse, these plans were scrapped due to the underperformance of the Pacific Rim Uprising at the box office. However, the franchise lives on in the form of an animated series on Netflix called Pacific Rim the Black, which has expanded the lore and world of Pacific Rim and received positive reviews. As for the timeline of the franchise, Pacific Rim the Black takes place after the events of the Pacific Rim Uprising, building upon the movie canon and referencing the Uprising Wars. The exact year of Pacific Rim the Black's events are not clearly defined, but it is likely set several years after the sequel. That's it for today's video, guys. Let us know what you think about Pacific Rim 3 in the comments below. Do you want it to happen? What would you like to see in it? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.